It seems Devlog 0 was released to moderate acclaim, but there are some things that I need to address before getting into the meat of the video. If you don't want to hear me ramble on about the feedback I got, go to this timestamp. There should be chapters that take you right there, but if not, blame YouTube. Okay, now that everyone here wants to listen to what I have to say, I'd like to give a shout out to this particular individual for some extremely helpful feedback. You can pause it and read it if you want, but the bottom line is that I'll try to have more visuals instead of just talking, and more talking. And regarding the better thumbnail bit, it worked for you, didn't it? That's all for old business, so how about that video? Since Tuba Knight is based on an old meme with a ton of stories already attached to it, I had to cut a lot of the fat to get what I want, starting with the warriors to include. There are 4 categories I have for how I could include someone: present with minor tweaks, changed to a new character, eligible for a different game or DLC, and would not work in the story. I'd rather have as few as possible in that last category. In fact, all of them are shown on screen right now. And as you can tell, most of them are spiritual beings that are too out there to fit the story. There are also good characters that I plan to have at some point, but didn't make the cut for this game. Actually, there are a couple characters that aren't seen but are mentioned, but I won't spoil the most important one. As for the heavily changed characters, I had to make some big changes to get them in, but if you look closely you can see the ties. The ones who got in are either fan favorites or just make too much sense not to include. I did have to change them a bit from the Hive Minds Collective account, but the spirit of the character is still there. When selecting who I wanted in, I obviously chose some of the most popular characters, but I also focused on those with original themes. Unfortunately, some people took music from elsewhere, put it over a Tuba person image, and called it a day. Some of them got as many views as even the biggest Tuba Warrior themes that were originally composed, burying ones made by people who actually cared, or even the original piece. So if you're wondering why I didn't include the Violin Legionary outright, there you go. I will be including a couple with unoriginal themes, but that's because they fit well with the story as characters. I suppose you should comment down below with some Tuba Warriors that you really want to see, and I'll try to fit them in somewhere. Possibly more important than the characters is the world they live in. I won't go over much in the way of lore and history, as much of it is told in the game, and what isn't is intentionally left vague. By world building, I mean making the world of the orchestra feel real. One of the simplest ways I do that is the use of idioms and mannerisms in the instrument's speech. For example, railroad tracks is kind of like curtains in English, as it's an informal way of saying you're about to die. Railroad tracks is an informal name for a caesura, which denotes a cut off or break in a piece. I'd figure instruments would equate death with the end of a song, or any sort of cut off. For all you non-musical folk out there, basically, if you don't know what a word or phrase means, it's probably a musical term and you should be able to use context clues. Then there's the world itself. If you recall in Devlog 0, I mentioned that each race of instruments lives in a unique biome: brass in a cold desert, woodwind in a forest, string in a large bay, and percussion in a mountain range. I'm trying to make the climate feel as real as possible, hence the Tchaikovsky Mountains separating the flats from the ocean and creating rain shadow. And also I'm treating the temperature as a sort of equivalent to southern Alaska or mid-Russia, peaking in the 70s in the heat of summer and absolutely plummeting in the winter. You might be thinking that since so many of them have heads that are basically huge chunks of brass, that they'd lose a lot of their heat during the winter, and to that I say, hats. If that doesn't make you appreciate the fact that I thought this world through in excruciating detail, I don't know what will. Oh, I know! The food and drinks! Valve oil is basically being used as the brass equivalent to alcohol. Not sure what the other races would drink. Haven't thought that far ahead, and it doesn't really matter. Also, considering the low melting point of liquors, they'd make good rations for the brass army during winter campaigns. I have no idea if this actually applies for valve oil, but the idea is there. Also, I'd figure cheese would make a good army ration. Cheese from Longhorns. Am I going insane? Tell me in the comments if you think I'm going insane. I'm sure you don't want me to just talk about fictional foods for 10 minutes, so I suppose I should share a bit about the structure of the Brass Army since it can use some explaining. I have it separated into different ranks that roughly coincide with training time. The common foot soldier of the Brass Army is the Guard, trained for about 1 to 2 years. Every man in the Brass Empire is expected to be a Guard, starting training at 20 and becoming a soldier by 21. Those who show more promise start earlier, and at about 3 years of training they become Knights who serve as sergeants for small platoons. Those with 5 years of training are squad leaders who oversee about 100 soldiers at a time. Up to about 10 years they can become Knight commanders who act as generals over entire armies. It is rumored that those with over 10 years of training are elite Knights who are unmatched in battle. Most of them were orphans taken in by the armories, but a couple have shown exceptional combat skill even at such a young age. At least one was both. However, there are very few and far between, and there are rumors whispered in the training grounds that they all get assigned secret missions directly from the Tuba King upon graduation, and none of them have returned. That's all well and good, but I did promise that you could get something out of these videos. In that case, the best advice I have for world building is that you should think like whoever's in your world. How would your people, or whatever you have in the place of people, see everything? With the instruments, they are obviously deeply connected with music, so their speech will be littered with musical idioms. As another example, say whatever race you're working with is made up of fish people who can live on land but do need to stay hydrated. Much of their life will revolve around being close to water, so a lot of their speech and culture should reflect that. The thing with world building is that it's really subjective and there aren't many hard and fast rules on what to do or what not to do. Pretty much all of them are like guidelines on what's been proven. As long as your world is convincing and doesn't have any oversights that make everything fall apart, your audience won't bat an eye. Now for the update on my game. After all, I have to try to hit that 10-minute mark. Not much has changed since the last update, except for the fact that I've made huge leaps with the save file system. Granted, this early on it might be more of a hindrance than a help, but something this convoluted needs nailed down now. Save systems can be extremely complicated and downright frustrating at times, but I've used enough duct tape and superglue to hold it together. This game is being made in Godot 3.6, so I had access to dictionaries. A dictionary is basically a list of values with names. It's like an array, but you can reference what's in it using something easier to remember than an abstract number. Sure, it might be more taxing on the system, maybe, I don't know, I'm not a computer scientist, but it has the trade-off of being several times more user-friendly. As for what's stored in the dictionary, it carries everything the game will need to be saved. A save file name, all items, equipped items, cutscenes finished, bosses beat, location, current health, etc. If you were paying attention, you might have caught on to the current health bit. Yes, this game will refill your health upon using a save point, but the reason that stat's there is because the save dictionary also transfers data between scene changes. Damage will add up during fights to and from save points, so there will be a bit of a resource management game for long treks. That's all for this devlog. I know that the 6th isn't exactly early in the month, but it's still the first Monday, so yeah. Sometime later this month, there will probably be a video on something other than Tuba Knight, so get ready. In the meantime, I have to, make the game.